famous incident, the Shani Nuzul, which led to the beginning part of Surah Al-Hujurat to be revealed. When Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu suggested Qa'qa ibn Ma'bad to be the Amir, and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he suggested Aqra bin Habs. So there was an ikhtilaf between Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and it happened right in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another incident which can be found in the books of hadith like in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, known as Hadith Qirtas. Hadith Qirtas. When a few days before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's death, he told the Sahabas who were there, bring me a pen and a paper so that I could write down some instructions. Most of the Sahabas were saying, yes, let's get the paper and pen. Perhaps Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to nominate the next Khalifa. Whereas Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said to everyone that no, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is ill. Let's not give Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam further taklif, further pain by telling him to write down some instructions. We have the Quran, we have the Sunnah. And in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam there was ikhtilaf, there was a commotion. And eventually Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told everyone to leave. And this happened when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on his deathbed a few days before he passed away. So ikhtilaf and differences will happen. I've given you two examples. There's another hadith which can be found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, Sunan Abu Dawud, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made 3 du'as, 3 supplications. One dua he mentioned was, "Oh Allah, do not destroy this ummah from anything above." Meaning in terms of tornadoes, in terms of storms, in terms of hurricanes, in terms of adab from the sky. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted this dua. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made another dua. "Oh Allah, do not destroy this ummah from anything from underneath." In terms of landslides, the earth swallowing people up. And again Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted this dua. So inshallah, this ummah will never be destroyed by natural disasters from the sky and nor by natural disasters from the earth. But then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a third dua, which is, "Oh Allah, let this ummah not have ikhtilaf or differences where they then kill and strike each other's neck." And regarding this third dua Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made, it was not accepted. So the first two Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted, but not the third one. So what does that tell you? That tells us that ikhtilaf and differences will happen. And sometimes these differences will lead towards qital, will lead towards fighting. Like it happened during Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu's khilafah, when you had some people who rejected giving zakat. Now again, there are differences of opinion, as mentioned by the commentators of Bukhari, that there were some who outright rejected zakat. So they became murtad. Then there were those who accepted the obligation of zakat, but they did not want to give it to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. They wanted to give it themselves. So Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu felt in this particular situation that these people who were refusing to hand zakat over to me, they are baghis, they are rebels. And it is because of this reason he decided to wage war against it. And even in the hadith of Bukhari, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu disagreed with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Whereas Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was willing to wage war with those people who refused to give zakat to him, Umar radiallahu anhu was saying that no, let's not wage war with them. So what that tells us is that ikhtilaf and differences will happen. Sometimes these differences, like in the case of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, led towards qital and fighting. Then there were occasions where differences happened in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometimes there were differences of opinions, like in the case of Umar radiallahu anhu and Uyayna bin Hisan, when Uyayna bin Hisan's nephew sought permission on behalf of his uncle to meet Umar radiallahu anhu during his khilafat. And when he met Umar radiallahu anhu, he started saying to Umar radiallahu anhu, oh, you're not fair, you're not just, you're this, you're that. And then Umar radiallahu anhu was willing to punish Uyayna for making these allegations against him. When his nephew Hur reminded Umar radiallahu anhu of the ayat of the Holy Quran, خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ, that my uncle, he is from the Jahilin, you should turn away from him. And Umar radiallahu anhu turned away from him. So ikhtilaf and differences, as I was saying, it happened. It will happen all the way until the day of judgment. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَجَعَلَ النَّاسِ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. What does that tell us? This ayat tells us that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, He could have made the entire ummah into just one nation. They could have just been one. But this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's test, that He has made different groups, different sects, differences of opinions, so that we are able to choose what is right and what is wrong. Because this world, brothers, is known as Darul Imtihan. It's the abode of tests. If everything was safe, and if there was only one deen and one manhaj and one way, and if we were all robotic, and if we were all trained to understand and accept and believe one manhaj and one approach to deen, then there is no point of this world. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the option. فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. That if you want to believe, you can. If you want to disbelieve, you can. لَا إِكْرَاهَ فِي الدِّينِ. There is no compulsion. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given all these different options, different opinions. Why? Because to make that particular point, that there will be differences, there will have to be differences in this world. And it's for us to kind of, number one, to differentiate what is right and what is wrong. And number two, that when it comes to secondary issues, that we don't make too much of a big issue when it comes to differences, but rather we respect each other's opinion, and we have some ethics, and we have some adabs, and we have some etiquette. Why? Because these differences existed during the Sahaba's time, during the Tabi'in's time, the Tabi' Tabi'in's time, during the Fuqaha Arba''s time, that there was ikhtilaf and there was always differences. And this is why Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimullah has said that if there was no differences amongst the Sahabas, the deen, the religion would have been very, very narrow. It is a mercy, brothers, that we have differences within this ummah. If all the Sahaba said the same, then everybody would have just done the same. But then there wouldn't have been that exit to act upon rukhsa and concession when there is a need. So what would that have meant is that we would have had to act upon this particular approach or way of deen, irrespective of where we live in the world, whether we live in America, whether we live in the UK, whether we live in Europe, whether we live in Africa or other parts of the world. We will have to act upon this particular opinion, which may be difficult. Like, let's take an example of seafood, sea creatures. Now, according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he says that besides fish, everything else is makruh tahrimi to eat. Whereas the other A'immas say that you can eat all sea creatures, prawns, lobsters, crabs. Now, if we had just this one opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, so those people who are living in Malaysia, Indonesia, where most of the food, China, Hong Kong, these places, most of the food is seafood. That's what they normally eat. So if we just had this opinion, the people living in the other parts of the world would have found it very difficult to implement and act upon Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah's opinion. So therefore there are other opinions like that of the other A'immas, other Fuqahas, other scholars, other Sahabas I've mentioned, which then gives them the ease to kind of act upon another opinion of a Sahaba according to the time, according to the era, and according to where they are living. Because if there was just one opinion, that would have been difficult for everyone to act upon. But it is a blessing for this ummah that we have different types of opinion. Because if you look at the nations before, the Jews in particular, they were like very, very harsh rules. I'm sure you're aware of the hadith of Abu Dawood, that if any najas, urine, fell onto their body, forget about washing it. No, washing that area would not make that area pure and bark. What they had to do, they had to cut that area. That's the only way that flesh would become bark and pure, is by cutting it. And there was no ifs or buts for the Jews. It was this way or the highway. And even for Christians as well, that they had very, very harsh rules. As I was just teaching earlier, that when it came to the topic of riba, for the Christians, very, very harsh rules. Even things like profit, murabaha, profit on a commodity was classed as interest for them. So there was harsh rules in other nations, and there wasn't the differences of scholars or imams who were just like what was mentioned in the Torah, what was mentioned in the Injil, they had to act upon it. But subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made things so easy for us that we can act upon different opinions. But as I was saying, I don't want to delve into the topic of different opinions and taqleed and these things, because that's not what the aim of today's talk is. The main aim of today's talk is that when we have differences of opinions, how to deal with those opinions. Because I know a lot of the youngsters sometimes get confused that, oh, the Quran is one, the Hadith is one, the Hadith of Bukhari, it's only one. But why are there differences of opinions? Why do the Muftis and the scholars give different fatwas? when the principles and when the hadith and everything is the same, why are there difference of opinions? So what I want to explain to everyone is that there are differences of opinions. I will try to explain how they all come about, and more importantly, what I want to get this message across to everyone is that just because people have differences of opinion, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are out of the fold of Islam. Because the problem which we have nowadays, and this is one of the signs of their judgment, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned, as in the hadith of Bukhari and other books as well, that yurfa'u al-ilm wa yakthuru al-jahl. That before the end of time, knowledge will disappear and it will be replaced by jahl and ignorance. Ittakhadha an-nas ru'usan juhal. People will start making the juhal and the ignorant ones as their leaders. فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. They will give fatwas without knowledge. They themselves are deviated and they will make others deviate. And what's happening is that because there isn't true knowledge about it, and true knowledge, brothers, is not just about studying a few books or studying with a couple of sheikhs. That's not always true knowledge. It's about studying, yes, being in the suhbah of the ulamas, the scholars, being in their company, spending time, nurturing your ilm and your knowledge. Only then you get true knowledge. And this is not something which is immediate. It's after many, many years, you then get the true knowledge. And when you do get the true knowledge, you then actually understand that, no, just because somebody has a difference of opinion, doesn't necessarily mean that they are out of the fold of Islam. Because what's happening now is because there isn't true knowledge about the real true ulama, sadly, many of them, especially due to the pandemic, have left us. When they've left this world, they've taken oceans of knowledge away with them. So we only have a few of their works remaining, a few of their fatawas remaining. And unfortunately, it's been these great pearls, these great oceans of knowledge have been replaced by, unfortunately, juhal. And the juhal, the ignorant ones, don't really understand always about differences and ikhtilaf. They just have one opinion and they expect everyone to follow that particular opinion. But when we look through the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never imposed his opinion upon anyone. He was actually so open, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that people were able to stand up and question sometimes Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he never took it personally. There's many occasions, even when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was about to start and pray the janazah salah of Abdullah bin Ubay, the munafiq. So if you remember the hadith of Bukhari that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about to start, Umar radiallahu anhu comes from behind and he starts pulling on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's qamis and telling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why are you praying the janazah of Abdullah bin Ubay? He's a munafiq. He said this about you, he said that about you. He did this against you, he did that against you. But yet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't react violently against Umar radiallahu anhu. He didn't say that, how dare you pull my qamis, go away from here, you're deviated, you're out of the fold of Islam. No, Rasulullah explained to Umar radiallahu anhu his view, Prophet's view, that look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, istaghfir lahum aw la tastaghfir lahum. I have a choice of seeking forgiveness, because janazah salah is like a form of forgiveness for the mayyit and for the deceased. So I have a choice whether I want to pray janazah or I don't want to pray janazah. So Rasulullah took that particular opinion. Whereas Umar radiallahu anhu was saying that no, he's a munafiq, we shouldn't be praying janazah salah behind him. So there were differences in opinion. There's another occasion in the hadith of Bukhari where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was distributing the booty. And what happened was that he gave it to everyone, and one person he didn't give it to. So Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu, who was there, he felt like, okay, Rasulullah gave it to everybody. This person, who I think of him to be a mu'min, a true believer, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't give it to him. So Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas anhu, he goes, he approaches Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he says, "Oh Prophet of Allah, like, why didn't you give it to him? Indeed, I consider him to be a mu'min." So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Our Muslim, do you mean that he's a Muslim?" I'm not going to go into the difference of what is a mu'min, a Muslim here. But then afterwards, Sa'd bin Waqqas anhu, he went away, but he was bugging him in his heart that why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam give it to everybody else but not to this person? So Sa'd bin Waqqas anhu went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam again and asked him the same question, "O Prophet of Allah, you gave it to everybody else, not to him, but I think he's a mu'min." And again Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent him back. And again Sa'd bin Waqqas anhu went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam raising the same issue. So what does that incident tell us is that Sahabas were open in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If they, say for example, didn't agree with the decision, they went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they even made their feelings clear that why are you doing this and not doing that? Like the example I gave of Sa'd bin Waqqas anhu and Umar anhu with regards to the munafiq. So the point I was trying to make is that when it comes to ikhtilaf, differences, it existed. There's always differences. But unfortunately, when true knowledge is replaced by jahal and ignorance, then what people think is that only one way or one opinion is the correct opinion. And any other opinions of anyone is considered to be incorrect, invalid, is considered to be insignificant. And to tell the truth, brothers, this is not been the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's never been the way of Islam and Deen. Yes, don't get me wrong, let me make it clear. In usul means in principles, there can't be differences of opinion. Somebody comes and says, "Na'udhu billah, there are two gods." We can't tolerate that. Somebody comes and says that, that another prophet will emerge after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sorry, we can't tolerate that. Somebody comes and says there's no such thing of life after death. Or he says that non-believers will also enter Jannah. Things like that we can't tolerate, because that goes to the core of Islam. That is against the principles of Islam. That is against what we as Muslims believe. So with usul, yes, there can't be any differences. So any kind of individual who kind of comes up with information or answers or opinions which totally goes against the deen, the sharia, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the hadith, the Quran. Somebody comes up and says that ayats of the Quran have been made up, fabricated, na'udhu billah. We can't tolerate such opinions whatsoever. But what today's talk is mainly about is regarding the secondary issues. It's what we call the furu in Arabic, the secondary issue. When it comes to how to pray your salah, some do rafu yadayn, some don't do rafu yadayn. When it comes to what things which breaks the wudu, Imam Shafi rahimullah says bleeding does not break the wudu. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimullah says that it does. So we're talking about these furu and secondary issues, where we have to understand and acknowledge, brothers, that in these issues there can be ikhtilaf, there can be differences, but the key thing is that we have to respect each other's opinion. We have to understand that where are these opinions coming from, and more importantly, that just because somebody has a difference of opinion does not make them out of the fold of Islam. We don't have to label them as being deviated. We don't have to label them as being misguided. Because as I said many times, the Sahabas and everyone, they had differences of opinions. Now I'm just going to mention a few reasons as to why there are differences of opinions. Even for yourselves as well, that you have different muftis, different scholars, different imams, especially now with YouTube and Facebook. You perhaps now are more aware of different opinions, different imams from all over the world. So there may be a local imam, a local mufti of yours is giving one fatwa. But then an imam or a scholar or a mufti from Malaysia or from Australia is giving a totally different fatwa. So sometimes with the youngsters, they get confused. And they constantly ask, who's right, who's wrong. So first and foremost, what we need to understand is that there's no right or wrong answers. They're right, both of them are right. You can't say, oh, this mufti is wrong and that mufti is right. No, both the muftis are right. Even though they come with two different opinions, they're right. Because they come to that opinion or to that conclusion based on their understanding of the situation and the scenario and what was exactly said. They're both right. Even though the answers may be totally polar opposites of each other. But because the answers they came up with was based on their understanding, obviously of the Quran and the Sunnah, they are also considered to be right as well. Now, just to make you understand this particular example, I'll give you a hadith, very famous hadith, which can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari. And there was a very famous battle known as the Battle of Ahzab. It was known as the Battle of Ahzab because it was that battle where everyone, all the non-believers, went against the Muslims, went against the Sahabas, went against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In terms of, you had the mushrikeen from Makkah attacking. So that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dug a trench. So it's also known as the Battle of Khandaq. And then from Medina Munawwara, you then had the Jews who were conspiring and planning against the Muslims. We're not going to go into the battle in detail, but after the Battle of Ahzab or Khandaq, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was then instructed by Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam that go to Banu Qurayza, a Jewish tribe, a Jewish settlement, and go and deal with them. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then instructed the Sahabas, let's go there. But then he made a clear instruction. What did he say to everyone? He said that none of you pray your Asr unless or until you reach Banu Qurayza. These are Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's sending the Sahabas and he's telling them, pray your Asr in Banu Qurayza. So Sahabas, they're making their way. On the way, they realize that by the time we reach Banu Qurayza, we are going to miss our Asr. So some Sahabas were suggesting that, look, let's just pray here on the way. Let's pray on the way, because by the time we get there, we're going to miss it. So let's pray our Asr Salah on the way. So some Sahabas started praying Asr on the way. The other Sahabas were saying, no. Rasulullah told us we have to pray Asr where? In Banu Qurayza. So if that means that we miss our Asr, it doesn't matter. Rasulullah told us, pray in Banu Qurayza. So you had two groups of Sahaba. One instruction. Instruction was the same. Pray your Asr in Banu Qurayza. One group of Sahabas took the linguistic black and white meaning of the text in terms of we have to pray Asr in Banu Qurayza. Whether it's qadha, whether we missed it, it doesn't matter, we have to pray there. Whereas other Sahabas took a more interpreted meaning of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's words, and they said that, look, what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant was that not literally miss our Asr Salah, but what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant was that, look, if we can reach Banu Qurayza before Asr time finishes, pray our Asr there. But if it's going to become Qadha, pray it on the way. So one instruction, but can you see there's two different opinions? So afterwards, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam found out, and the Sahabas told him of what happened, what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? He said, both of you groups are correct. Asabta. You're right. So the hadith was one, the instruction was one, two different opinions, but what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say to each one of the group? You're right. So what we need to understand is that the reason why sometimes differences happen, and that's why I said both are right, is sometimes it's based on interpretations of the hadith. You have Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala, a very famous young Sahabi. His motto when he came to hadith was that he would always take the linguistic meaning of hadith, meaning the literal meaning of the hadith. He was not one of those Sahabas who took like the interpreted meaning. It was like, look, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it, we're going to act it out. So many occasions, even when he came for tawaf, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu would actually push people around to go and kiss the black stone. Other Sahabas wouldn't, because other Sahabas took the meaning of, yes, kissing the black stone is a sunnah, but giving taklif, like pushing somebody around, that's haram. So to perform a sunnah, we should not be committing a haram. That's what the other Sahabas took the interpretation of. But Ibn Umar took the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about kissing the black stone in its linguistic, literal, black and white meaning that irrespective of whether I push somebody or not, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissed the black stone, I will have to go and kiss the black stone. So the hadith is the same, but some Sahabas interpreted that yes, kiss the black stone when it's empty and no one is there, and on the condition that you're not hurting anyone. Whereas Ibn Umar took the black and white meaning that whether somebody's there, whether it's quiet, whether it's empty, whether it's jam-packed, I will have to go and kiss the black stone. So sometimes the differences happen because of the different interpretation of the Sahaba. Sometimes different interpretations happen based on the individual. Like in the case of Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he donated all his wealth for the battle of Tabuk. So what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He accepted Abu Bakr the sacrifice, and he praised him, made dua for him. But then another Sahaba, like Ka'b bin Malik radiallahu ta'ala, after his tawbah was accepted, He said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I want to give all my wealth away to charity. What did Rasulullah say to him? He said no. And eventually Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam agreed that, okay, you give 1/3 of your wealth away. So again, different individuals, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave different opinions. So for Abu Bakr he said, give all your wealth away. He accepted it. But for Ka'b bin Malik and other Sahabas, when they wanted to give all their wealth away for charity, he never accepted it. There's a hadith which can be found in Tirmidhi also, where a person came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he asked a question. Can I kiss my wife whilst fasting? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to this Sahabi, you can't. Another Sahabi came, same question. Can I kiss my wife whilst fasting? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Why? Because the first Sahabi who asked the question, he was young. So there was a danger that if he kissed his wife, it may lead towards intercourse, he may invalidate and break his fast. Whereas the other Sahabi, he was old. So if he kissed, there wasn't that danger that it may lead towards intercourse and invalidating the fast. So what we can derive from here is that Rasulullah ﷺ gave different answers to different situations. Sometimes the hadith was one, but it was interpreted in different ways. But like I mentioned with the story of the Banu Qurayza, that what Rasulullah ﷺ did was that he considered everyone's opinion to be right and correct. And understanding this, let's try to now put it into our own community, in our own setting. That when we have differences, so let's start off with ulama and scholars. It doesn't mean one imam's right or one imam's wrong. They're both right. They're looking at it from different perspectives. Like I gave the example of the young Sahabi who's asking about, can I kiss my wife? Old Sahabi asking, can I kiss my wife? Different perspective. They're giving two different answers. So when you see Muftis giving different answers, there's nothing to be confused about. Yes, what you can be confused is if one Mufti is giving opinions about usul which totally contradicts our belief, then that's where the confusion arises. But no Mufti will kind of like, no, will say, oh, a prophet's going to come afterwards, or there are two gods, no one will say that. So where the difference is going to be is in the secondary issues. So when you have different imams, scholars giving different opinions, there's nothing to be confused about and say, well, why is this sheikh giving a different fatwa? No, because even during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, Sahabas had different opinions. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave different fatwas himself. Sahabas interpreted the same hadith, the same ayat of the Quran in different ways. So likewise, when we have imams who are giving different opinions, nothing to be confused about, does it? Because sometimes I've noticed with the youngsters that when they see these differences, they start questioning the Quran and the hadith. Why are the different opinions? And they start questioning the authenticity of the Quran, authenticity of hadith. But no, the hadith are authentic. The verses of the Quran are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's been no changes. These are the true words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it is a blessing for this ummah that we are able to use the same text and understand it in a way which suits us according to our situation and according to our scenario. So first and foremost, when we see imams or muftis or scholars differing, don't be too worried. It's not like there's confusion in the Quran. That's why the difference of opinions. No, the Quran is crystal clear. The hadith is crystal clear. It's the difference of the interpretation. And the difference of interpretation, there's nothing wrong with that. because the Sahabas and everybody else, they also differed in their interpretation as well. The next level down for us is when we see brothers who are perhaps not imams or alims or muftis, when they are differing on certain opinions and certain situations. So I mentioned this in yesterday's program about imposing our opinions. So as I was saying that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never imposed opinions upon people. He will give his opinions, but he would even say that when it comes to worldly related things, those who are the experts, those who know that area or field well, leave them to it. And I gave the example yesterday of something what is mentioned in the books of hadith as ta'bid, where in Medina Munawwara, because Medina Munawwara was full of date palm trees, the people of Medina Munawwara, they used to do something called pollinizing the date palm trees, where they would get the pollen from the male date palm trees and scatter it over the female date palm trees. And by doing that, it yields abundance of dates. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina Munawwara and he saw the people of Medina doing this, he asked them, what are you doing? And they said, oh, we're doing ta'bid, we're just pollinizing the date palm trees. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no, don't do that, there's no point. So they all listened to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That year, hardly any fruits, hardly any dates were yielded. So they came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they complained and said, oh, you told us not to do it and we didn't do it. And look, there's hardly any dates which have grown. So what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? He said that things which are from a worldly perspective, you know more than me. Things which are from a deen or religious perspective, then yes, you kind of like listen to me, listen to my instructions. But when it comes to worldly perspective, then you are more knowledgeable of that. So as I was saying that when it comes to like non-alims, non-muftis, non-scholars, so those types of differences of opinions we should inshallah try to tolerate. Try our best not to impose other people as well. Even though you may be thinking that, oh, I'm doing amr bil ma'ruf nahy anil munkar. The reality is that we live in a time where people unfortunately don't want to listen to amr bil ma'ruf nahy anil munkar anymore, unfortunately. As mentioned in a hadith of Sunan al-Tirmidhi, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that i'tamiru bil ma'ruf wa tanahaw anil munkar. Which means do your amr bil ma'ruf, tell people to do good. And tanahaw anil munkar, and prohibit and forbid people from doing evil. Wa tanahaw anil munkar. But then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, hatta, until a time will come, إِذَا رَأَيْتَ شُحًّا مُطَاعًا, when you see greed being obeyed and followed. وَحَوًا مُتَّبَعًا, when you start seeing desires being followed. وَالدُّنْيَا مُؤْتَرَةً, and when you start seeing dunya and people giving preference of worldly things over religious things. And the last point Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said was وَإِعْجَابًا كُلِّ ذِي رَعْيٍ بِرَعْيِهِ, when every possessor of his opinion is happy and pleased with his opinion. And when you see that, what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? He said that stick to yourself. عَلَيْكَ بِخَاصَةِ نَفْسِكَ وَدَعْ الْأَوَامِ, and leave out the awam and the general public. So do you know nowadays, especially nowadays, let's be honest, these four things which I mentioned, we see that nowadays, don't you? Like seriously, you'll find people who know nothing about deen. They develop an opinion about deen and they're so happy with that opinion. They're so stubborn on that opinion. Like you speak to them, tell them, look brother, you're wrong. it's against the Quran Sunnah, but they don't want to listen. They're so happy with that opinion. They'll have a ideology or a particular viewpoint about deen or anything, and they just stick to it, and they're never ever going to budge. So with those types of people, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, which will happen before the end of time, but it's happening now, so it is the end of time kind of nowadays, isn't it? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when that happens, then you just stick to yourself and just ignore the people. So yes, I know we like to have opinions, and the reality is that yes, our opinions, just keep it to yourself, but don't try to enforce it upon others. Don't try to impose it upon others. Because the reality is that people would not like your opinion, and also more importantly, people, they may have their own different opinions, which they are happy with, they are stubborn with. So even though you may be thinking to yourself that, oh, I'm telling my opinion with good intention so that he changes his life, the situation now has become such that people don't want to listen to Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar. Seriously, there's so many people out there, which I'm sure you know, they're dealing in drugs, they're dealing in alcohol, they're doing zina. They know it's wrong. We know it's wrong. We go and tell them. But do they listen to us? No. So the reality has now become such that we have to obviously, yes, we tell them, but when people have unfortunately taken the haram to such an extent that they are now justifying it, then for those individuals, you know what, it's no point in speaking to them, telling them anything. You just have to stick to yourself and ignore others. So inshallah, the key point you mentioned is respect others' opinions. Respect the opinions of the ulamas, the muftis, the scholars who are around you. And even within your community, those who may be from different background, different madhabs, whether they follow imams, some don't follow imams, some are Hanafi, some are Shafis, some are Jamaati Islami, some are Brelvis, whatever they are. Respect their opinions. But remember, these opinions which they have has to be within the Quran and the Sunnah. And the key thing is that just because they have different opinions, and their opinions may not be exactly coinciding with your viewpoint, does not mean they've become deviated, they've gone away from Islam. Because as I said, with the examples I've given before, Sahabas, noble companions, they differed with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But never did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam question their faith or their deen or their iman for doing that. But rather Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised people who questioned, because that showed that how much conviction and faith they had in their heart, that whenever they saw something which they thought wasn't appropriate, their iman was of such a level that they kind of raised it. But after they raised it, the key thing is that they respected each other's opinion. And that's the key thing. Respect each other's opinion and don't differ with the intention to cause fitna and mischief. And I'll leave with one final hadith, which is a very famous one, of prayers in Miah. Those of you been for Hajj will know that in Miah, if you are a traveler, you pray 2 rakats for Dhuhr, Asr and Isha. Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu was of the opinion that you pray 4. Abdullah bin Mas'ud anhu was of the opinion you pray 2. But Abdullah bin Mas'ud anhu would still pray behind Hazrat Uthman anhu, because remember, he's the Amir. So in those days, whoever the Amir was, they were also the Amir of the Hajj. So they had to go and do the Hajj, and everybody follows the Amir. So Hazrat Uthman anhu would pray 4. Abdullah bin Mas'ud anhu, he totally disagreed with Uthman anhu's opinion of 4. He was of the opinion you pray 2. But yet, behind Uthman anhu, he still prayed 4. Even though his own personal opinion was 2. And people suggested to Hazrat Abdullah bin Mas'ud anhu, oh, why are you praying behind Uthman anhu 4? He's praying 4, you're praying 2. And you can imagine if I was to add a modern day slant to that explanation, whenever we have different opinion and you get people from within, they'll say, oh, this imam's praying like this, you praying like that, go and form your own masjid. That's what we normally say, tell them, don't we? So they were trying to cause fitna. So what did Abdullah bin Masud al-Anhu do? He said, no. Yes, my opinion is true. As Uthman al-Anhu's opinion is false. But to cause fitna and ikhtilaf is more worse. So can you see, even though Abdullah bin Masud al-Anhu disagreed with Hazrat Uthman al-Anhu regarding the number of rakats, but because he didn't want to cause any ikhtilaf, any fitna, any mischief, and he didn't want to destroy the community, he made sure that he prayed behind him. And this is the advice I give, that sometimes you may come across situations in your locality or even outside your locality. You may go somewhere else to work later on in your life where perhaps you're praying behind the imam who, I know, he's praying one rakat per witr. He's doing, something else, which perhaps not what Hanafis may do, but other imams may do. So in that situation, doesn't mean that, let's cause ikhtilaf and differences and, let's form our own group, our own organization. No, pray behind them, inshallah. Why? Because to cause divisions and ikhtilaf is far more worse than, say, for example, humbling yourself, even though you may think the other opinion is incorrect. But it's much better to pray behind someone rather than causing fitna and ikhtilaf. And this is one of the last points I'll mention, and that last piece of advice is that, yes, difference of opinion, but accept others' opinion, respect it, and more importantly, don't cause fitna and ikhtilaf by trying to form your own agenda and group just because your opinions are slightly different. Inshallah, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us tawfiq to act on what has been said. Again, inshallah, I'd like to thank the Masjid Committee or Board for allowing us to, inshallah, say a few words about the words of the Holy Quran and about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us tawfiq to act on what has been said. I'd also like to thank Shaykh Nazrul Islam Sahib for arranging the event, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Jazakallah khair, Hazrat Shaykh Tisab. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give all of us the fit to practice and follow these beautiful advices. If we follow them, then there will be no more fights, inshallah, ever. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it such. Ameen. There's food upstairs.
Do we have questions?
Oh, there's Q&A.
Just ask if they have.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are there any questions?
Okay,
No,
so inshallah food.
yeah, sure.
So inshallah food upstairs, inshallah, so you can go upstairs for food, inshallah. And I would like to thank all the ulama who are here also. Jazakallah khair for